Welcome back to the deep dive. You've brought us, well, quite a stack of sources today, haven't you? Taking us right into the heart of India, the Chhotanagpur region.
That's right. It's a really fascinating area historically.
Yeah, it seems incredibly complex, where the sort of accepted stories about who settled when, well, they're constantly being challenged, aren't they? Especially by documented evidence.
Absolutely. And that's the key, the documented evidence. We're looking at hard data points here, things that let us challenge, frankly, decades of historical guesswork.
This work about some major communities, right? Santhal, Kurmi, Munda, Asur.
Exactly. We have facts about how they actually arrived, how they governed, and, well, these facts often clash pretty dramatically with the popular, the simplified stories people hear.
Okay, so our mission today then is to really pin down these timelines, cut through the noise, figure out what's documented history versus what's just.
Well, a story that stuck around. That's the plan. We need to hold up things like, say, written accounts of ruling dynasties against the kind of historical ideas that often start the clock way too recently.
Right.
Because the tension here is, how much deep history are we just missing if we only look at the last, say, 200 years?
Okay.
So we need to look at the groups with the shortest verifiable timelines first, just to see what that approach leaves out.
All right, let's do that. Let's start with a timeline that sounds like it gets misstated quite a bit. The Santhal community, the common story sometimes ties them to the Mughal period, right? Which would put them there centuries ago.
Yeah, that's a common one, but the sources are really specific here. We can basically toss out those vague references to Mughals or earlier eras.
Okay.
The key finding, the documented point, is that certified, verifiable Santhal settlement in Demidiko, that's the Rajmahal foothills area, was now Santhal Pargana.
Right.
It only began after 1810.
After 1810, wow. That single date, that's kind of a huge anchor, isn't it?
It really is. Because if the certified settlement only starts in the early 19th century,
then any story claiming they were established back in the Mughal era, which ended, decades before, it's just challenged by proof.
fundamentally challenged, yes. It creates this enormous historical gap.
Right.
If the Santhals are verifiably settling after 1810, it means for, well, thousands of years before that, other groups must have been governing and farming that land.
So a narrative starting post-1810 just ignores all that prior history of governance.
Completely ignores it, yeah. The deep history just vanishes.
Okay, so if we step back before 1810, who was there? Who had deep, documented histories of governance? This takes us to the Kurmi community, I think.
It does. And their history, according to these sources, often gets marginalized, which is strange because the documentation for their rule is incredibly solid.
How solid are we talking?
We're talking about the Kurmi Panchkat kings. The sources have written history citing their rule spanning, get this, 52 generations.
52.
Oh.
Seriously. 52 generations of documented rule.
Yes. This isn't just, oral tradition. It's a deeply documented lineage.
For perspective, that rivals some of the oldest royal houses in Europe, doesn't it? And the sources even mention specifics, like totems.
They do. They mentioned the Damodar Sankwar totem, for instance, as one of 81 associated with this line.
Wow.
And this brings up the critical question the sources themselves ask. Why would historians or, modern storytellers start the narrative with groups settling just 200 years ago?
Like the post-1810 date we just talked about.
Exactly. When you have 52 generations of documented rule right there in the same region much earlier, it feels like, well, an intentional overlooking of ancient governance.
And focusing only on the recent stuff lets guesswork fill the gaps about the ancient past, maybe.
That seems to be what happens.
Speaking of guesswork, you mentioned these sources specifically call out and dismiss some common theories about origins. Why were those theories floating around so much?
Well, these ideas, they often pop up from more recent social or political commentary. They tend to serve simpler kind of modern narratives. They try to connect ancient groups to more recent visible events. But when you actually check the written records, they just don't hold up.
Okay, let's list them out. The ones the sources refute. First, this idea that groups were brought in by the British specifically for, opium farming.
Yeah, that one's entirely unsubstantiated in the documents about the original settlers. No basis.
Okay. Second, the claim they only settled here as part of the Maratha army.
Again, dismissed. Just no evidence in the primary settlement records.
Right. Third, this theory they were kicked out of Uttar Pradesh by the Mughals And then came to Chhotanagpur.
Also incorrect. Their arrival timing and migration patterns just don't fit that popular theory at all.
And finally, the specific idea that the Kurmi migrated only from Bihar to settle here.
That one's also not supported, especially when you look at the deep history of the Kurmi Panchkat kings. It shows they were here governing for a very long time.
So these theories are just not based on the verified written history.
Pretty much. The sources stress that while they might be convenient for some narratives, they lack grounding in the actual documentation.
That's a pretty strong debunking of 4 persistent myths, then. Okay, so if 52 generations is deep history, let's go even deeper to the really deep layer of documented history here. The Munda people. What's the timeline for them in India?
Now we're talking deep time. The Munda presence in India is documented as starting maybe 5,000 to 6,000 years ago.
5,000 to 6,000 years ago. That's incredible.
It is, and it's significant because their entry into the subcontinent happens roughly around the same time the Aryans started coming in from the west.
Wow. So they're on the map millennia before some of the groups we just discussed. But Chhotanagpur wasn't their first stop in India, was it?
No. Chhotanagpur was their final destination, basically.
Yeah.
The journey was long, complex, suggesting they came from areas like coastal Odisha, maybe Azamgarh, moving over thousands of years. The documented history, which mentions figures like Rishamunda, suggests their arrival, specifically in the Chhotanagpur Plateau, was, well, much later than their entry into India, but still very ancient, about 1,500 to 2,000 years ago.
So still 15 to 20 centuries of verifiable presence in Chhotanagpur itself.
Exactly. A very long time.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting with their culture. The Munda are known for those big stone artifacts, right? The Pathal Gadi.
Yes, the megalithic burial sites.
Is there any sign of those distinctive markers in the places they migrated through before they got to Chhotanagpur?
And that's a really crucial point the sources make. No. There's no evidence of those massive stone Pathal Gadi sites found in the areas of their earlier migrations.
Huh. So what does that suggest?
It strongly suggests that while they carry their identity, obviously, the intensive practice of building these huge stone markers either developed or maybe just became really central to their culture only after they finally settled in the Chhotanagpur region.
Fascinating. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Early civilization technology. The people often call the Asur. The term Asur civilization gets used a lot, but how do our sources clarify this?
The source material is quite careful here. It clarifies that Asur wasn't really a single unified civilization like we might think of it today.
Okay.
The practice of iron smelting, tool making, which is what the sources link to the Asur period, defining the Iron Age there, that inherently needs a mixed, specialized social structure.
Ah, right. Division of labor.
Exactly. You need miners, smelters, smiths, people organizing things. Iron Age tech demands that kind of specialization.
That makes sense. So if the Iron Age starts here in the Asur period, what were they making first? You know, we might jump to weapons.
Logically, yeah, but that's probably not the first priority for people settling fertile land. The sources suggest that, at the start of the Iron Age in Chhotanagpur, the really vital tools, the primary things being made, would have been agricultural tools.
Like plows, axes, hoes.
Precisely. Stuff essential for clearing land, for farming. Those tools would likely come before things for large-scale war or mass hunting.
So, pulling that together, what does it tell us about the region's basic economy way back then?
It points pretty clearly to established agriculture existing in Chhotanagpur right from the Asur period. Using iron tools to work that often tough land meant a farming economy was there thousands of years ago. Technology and subsistence were linked immediately.
Okay, so you've got all these powerful groups, Munda, Asur, Kurmi arriving, existing over, 6,000 years? Their interactions couldn't have been simple, right? Not just conflict or just cooperation?
Definitely not simple. The sources show this dynamic relationship, overlapping territories, overlapping histories.
Like between the Munda and Asur.
Yeah, exactly. We see clear evidence of both conflict and eventual coexistence between them. Historical accounts mention periods of fighting, but also, both groups burying their dead in the same Pathal Gadi.
The same stone burial sites, wow.
Yes. They shared sacred space, ritual space, even if they fought over land sometimes.
And what about the Kurmi? We talked about their kingdom, but did they interact with the Munda in Munda-ruled areas?
Oh, absolutely. There's documented proof of Kurmi presence inside what were Munda-governed regions. You still find villages and hills named Kurumgar.
Kurumgar. clearly marking Kurmi origin or settlement.
Exactly. In areas that were under Munda rule, it shows a long history of shared territory, interaction,
Yeah.
not just strict, separate bubbles.
And this shared territory, this administrative presence, it leads somewhere important later, right? Involving another group, the Orman people.
Precisely. This is where governance really connects the dots across time. The Munda kings, acting as rulers, later designated these existing Kurumgar areas, the places the Kurmi had a strong presence,
Right.
specifically for the settlement of the Orminon people. It's a direct chain. Kurmi presence, Munda administration, then Oromon settlement, designated in those specific areas. It shows pretty sophisticated governance happening long ago.
And bringing this administrative history, these decisions from centuries ago forward, what happened when the Munda kingdoms eventually weakened?
Well, as Munda influence declined, they were historically pushed southward, away from the central city, Ranchi.
Okay.
And that demographic shift, which has roots in centuries of these political and administrative moves, is actually still visible today. You can see it reflected in the current population balance in Ranchi, the Oraon versus Munda numbers.
So ancient power shifts and land decisions from way back then still shape the map you see today.
They absolutely do. It's quite remarkable.
This deep dive has really recalibrated the whole timeline of Chhotanagpur, hasn't it? The sources paint a picture that isn't simple at all, but incredibly layered, thousands of years deep.
Yeah, we've gone from recent settlement narratives right back to ancient governance structures just in this conversation.
It's quite a journey.
And if you connect it back, the documented evidence, those 52 generations of Kurmi rule, the Munda being in India for 6,000 years, that specific Santhal date, post-1810, it just completely challenges any story focused only on the last couple of centuries.
Yep.
The real story of the region's governance, its culture, its economy, it's rooted in this incredibly deep, complex history.
It really underlines why it's so important for you, the listener, to look past those maybe widely accepted but often unverified recent histories, to grasp the true complexity of ancient governance and these huge long-term population shifts.
Absolutely. And, it raises a pretty interesting question for all of us to think about going forward.
Yeah.
Well, given this complex, documented history of shifting land designation, like how Munda kings set aside Kurumgar areas for the Orion, what other demographic realities we see today, maybe related to resources or political boundaries, how many of those are secretly rooted in documented administrative decisions made hundreds, maybe even thousands of years ago? It kind of reminds you that every village, every piece of land has an administrative history just waiting to be uncovered.
That is definitely something to mull over. A great thought to leave us with. Thanks for joining us for this